This is Donald Trump, the 45th and soon-to-be 47th President of the United States. On Friday, January 19th, 2024, Trump was in Concord, New Hampshire, talking about his opponent, Nikki Haley.
You know, when she comes here, she gets like 9 people, and the press never reports the crowds, you know. By the way, they never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley, you know, did you know they destroyed all of the information, all of the evidence, everything? Deleted and destroyed all of it, because of lots of things. Like Nikki Haley is in charge of security. We offered her 10,000 people, soldiers, National Guard, so whatever they want. They turned it down. They don't want to talk about that. These are very dishonest people.
Okay, so President Trump clearly screwed up here and referred to Nancy Pelosi as Nikki Haley. Is it a good look? Not really.
Is any of Trump's supporters, are they noticing these gaffes, especially, as Trump, who is 77 years old, has attacked Biden, who's 81, as being too old and mentally unfit, and here he is mixing up Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley.
Are Trump supporters noticing these gaffes? Look, if you want to do a 5-minute segment on how Trump confused Nancy Pelosi with Nikki Haley, by all means, go for it. However, CNN has no such interest in covering President Joe Biden's gaffes, which occur every single time he makes a public appearance. For example, while giving remarks in North Carolina, Joe Biden gave a special shout out.
I also want to mention Congresswoman Deborah Ross. Where's Deborah? I just had my picture taken with her. That's probably why she left. No, all kidding aside. Anyway, she couldn't be here, actually. That's not true. I got it mixed up.
So let's break this down. Joe Biden not only called out to a congresswoman who wasn't there, but thought he had seen her earlier and took a photo with her. 81 million votes, guys. Now, does Biden thinking that he saw someone who wasn't in the same state have anything to do with Trump? Of course not. But how both of these events were covered or not covered by the media are very revealing. Several outlets ran with the Trump story, including NBC News, where they also said, the former president has previously mixed up President Joe Biden and former President Barack Obama, among other flubs. I mean, where were the dozens of articles pointing out when Joe Biden called Donald Trump George and his doctor wife had to correct him?
And the character of the country, in my view, is literally on the ballot. What kind of country we're going to be. 4 more years of George, going to find ourselves in a position where...
And you could chalk that up to muscle memory, but then again, he couldn't remember George Bush's last name, so I don't know. And what about the time Biden was referring to his Surgeon General?
And so I think that, one of the reasons I appointed Vivek Murthy, Admiral Murthy, to become become the guy in charge of the whole mental health piece of this operation, is because he understands it.
So, A, Joe Biden started to call Vivek Murthy the Solicitor General. B, calling him Admiral is inaccurate, as he is technically a Vice Admiral. And C, his last name isn't Murphy.
Admiral Murphy.
And for confirmation, according to the official White House transcript, Joe Biden said Murphy. And remember that Joe Biden is reading from a teleprompter, so what's the excuse here?
The Nikki Haley thing
that one
was disturbing. We talked about this on Friday about Obama and his problems, and there was actually some poor guy who said, "Oh, they're making things up now to distract from Joe Biden." No, I'm not trying to distract from Joe Biden. Joe Biden's doing just fine.
Morning Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski are going to sit there and pretend that for every Trump flub, there aren't 500 Biden flubs. And they're going to claim that Trump getting a name wrong is disturbing. And yet they're going to completely ignore 3 years of Joe Biden's gaffe-filled residency, claiming that Joe Biden's doing just fine.
Putin may circle Kyiv with tanks, but he'll never gain the hearts and souls of the Iranian people.
It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq. He's
losing the war at home.
How do we get to the place where, Putin decides he's going to just invade Russia? Nothing like this has happened since World War II.
And the order, and that increases the total vaccine order in the United States by 50%, from 400 million order to 600 million. This is enough vaccine to fully vaccinate 300 Americans. But we want to make, look, I want to repeat, it'll be enough to fully vaccinate 300 Americans.
Visit vaccines.gov, vaccines.gov.
Replace every lead pipe in America so every child, when they turn on the faucet, can drink clean water and there's no brain damage. Siemens Corporation laid off workers who were making wind turbine parts and put the plant in Iowa and Kansas into what they now call, they refer to as hibernation. I hibernated in Iowa for a while, but look.
And so the confusion just continues.
There's just really no comparison.
So obviously, the way that Donald Trump is covered by the media is very different than how they treat Joe Biden. And if the so-called fact checkers had any journalistic integrity, they would go after Biden with the same furious energy that they have when it comes to the bad orange man. And if they did, it might look something like the rest of this video.
Today, folks in America, with incredible help of your mayors, we've created 14 million new jobs. 14 million new jobs.
Now, I will continue to point out that Joe Biden did not create 14 million new jobs, as 9.4 million of those jobs were recovered jobs that were lost during the pandemic.
And by the way, even those historic investments that we've made over the last 3 years, we still reduced the deficit during this whole period. All those investments, we still reduced the deficit by $1 trillion.
This is absolutely 100% not true. And to make sure that we're all on the same page, let's quickly go over what a deficit is. Say that your household budget for the month of January is $1,000, but you only have $800 to spend. That means you have a budget deficit of $200. Easy, right? But let's say that for February, you adjusted your spending to $900, but you still only had $800 to spend. Well, congratulations, you have reduced the budget deficit by $100. Now, while you may have reduced the deficit, it's not remotely impressive because you still have a deficit. You're spending too much. But you're gonna put that remaining $100 on a credit card that you have no intention of paying back, just like the federal government does. Now, what Joe Biden is claiming is that he has reduced the deficit throughout his tenure as president, but that's not true. In 2022, the federal government spent $6.27 trillion, but only brought in $4.9 trillion, which means there was a deficit of $1.38 trillion. In 2023, the federal government spent $6.13 trillion, but only brought in $4.44 trillion, which means there was a deficit of $1.7 trillion. And that means that the deficit increased by $320 billion.
When we moved from Scranton, when jobs were eliminated in Scranton, we moved back to Delaware, where my dad had been raised. To Claymont, Delaware, right on the border of Pennsylvania, that arc that goes up in.
Nope. Joe Biden's father did not grow up in Delaware. He grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and moved to Scranton, Pennsylvania when he was 14 years old.
More oil refineries than any place in the nation, including Houston at the time. Well, guess what? Almost all my friends, including me, we had asthma. And if it was the first frost, you turn on the windshield wipers. It's the God's truth. And there'd be an oil slick in the window. An oil slick. Well, you all come from places that have those alleys.
Joe Biden has told this story dozens of times during his presidency, that oil floated in across state lines and landed on his family's car windshield, but you could only see it when it was cold. And this magic oil also gave him asthma. Isn't it funny that Joe Biden is the only one in the entire world to have ever witnessed this phenomena? No, because he's lying.
People are beginning to have, and if you look at the consumer confidence, it's way up.
No, it's not. According to the Consumer Confidence Index, it's much lower compared to where it was even 2.5 years ago. And it's way down compared to the highs of the Trump administration.
64%, I think maybe 62%, Americans think their personal circumstance is good and it's getting better.
Actually, according to a CBS News YouGov poll, 64% disapprove of Joe Biden's handling of the economy. And only 35% of Americans believe the economy is good. But don't worry about those polls, America, because if Joe Biden says it, it must be true. And if you believe that, you probably have brain damage.
So I'm still committed to banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. We've done it before and we can do it again. We have to pass universal background checks. It doesn't violate the Second Amendment, for God's sake. I used to teach the Constitution at the University of Pennsylvania.
Nope. Joe Biden was an honorary professor at the University of Pennsylvania who never taught a single class. He did, however, co-teach a seminar on constitutional law at Widener University School of Law, which is ironic because he doesn't understand the Constitution.
Look, folks, the situation is simple. You know, when we passed the Second Amendment, guess what? You weren't allowed to have a cannon. No, I'm serious, not a joke.
But that's not true. The Second Amendment not only doesn't prohibit anyone from owning a cannon, but you can buy a cannon right now if you want to.
It's just kind of amazing. They think that you could have anything. That never was the case. There have always been limitations on what you could purchase.
And this is a claim that Joe Biden has been making for years. And it's bullshit. So I reached out to David Kopel, the research director and Second Amendment project director at the Independence Institute. He referred me to an article that he wrote with his colleague Joseph Greenlee, which lists and describes every colonial, state, or federal law restricting a particular type of arm from 1607 to 1899. Kopel and Greenlee write, naturally, after facing the threat of disarmament and thus certain destruction, America's founders were extremely protective of the right to arms. Before, during, and after the Revolution, no state banned any type of arm, ammunition, or accessory, nor did the Continental Congress, the Articles of Confederation Congress, or the federal government created by the US Constitution in 1787. Instead, the discussions about arms during the ratification of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights centered on ensuring that the people had enough firepower to resist a tyrannical government. TLDR, you could buy a cannon. But constitutional professor Joke Biden writes this all off by proceeding to misquote Thomas Jefferson.
So anyway, look, and I love people who say, the blood of liberty.
What?
Or the tree of liberty is watered with the blood of patriots.
No, stupid. The quote goes, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Joe.
Well, guess what, man? I didn't see a whole lot of patriots that are out there walking around making sure that we have these weapons. Well, and if you really want to worry about the government, you need an F-16. You don't need a AR-15. No, I'm serious when you think about it. I'm not joking, because that's one of the arguments made by the right, that we need to be able to protect ourselves against the government. Well, look.
So Joe Biden claims that if you want to take on the government, you're going to have to bring more than firearms. But on the other hand, Brandon and the Democrats continue to insist that a bunch of unarmed rioters nearly brought down the government on January 6th. You can't have it both ways, you idiots. Anyway, that's it for now. Follow me on X at Don't Walk Run, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time, if there is next time.